Java Basics Review, page 6. This is our last page. We're going to work on the last three questions, 25 through 27. We are focusing on making methods now. Specifically, this one gets into returning. Up to now, we've not returned anything. We've gone void, which means we've just done something in there. Void methods don't accomplish a lot because they don't return something. So let's get to it. Question 25. Write a method that accepts two strings and returns the combination of the both. This is the exact same method we just wrote, except this one's not printing it, it's returning it. So to make our class or to make our method, we use public static. Now, instead of void, we're actually going to get back and return a combination of strings, which means our result is going to be a string. So we're going to return a string, and that's where we identify that right there. We're going to call this, I'll just call it combo return, lacking any originality. It brings in two strings. String word 1, comma, comma separates parameters. String word 2. And now, this one's exactly the same. The other one I did a system out print. Now I'm just returning, so I can just use the word return. Remember, you can have as many return statements as you want in a method. The minute it hits the return statement, the method is exited. So I'm just going to return word 1 plus word 2. Close my method out. And that's as hard as it got for returning. The only thing I did different was I went from a void to now telling it what I'm giving it back. Question 26. Write a method to return the result of three decimal numbers multiplied by each other. So it's a decimal number. That data type is a double. So same thing. Public, static. I'm returning something, and I'm returning a double. I'm returning a decimal number. So that's a double. And I'll call it multi-3. And then I have three decimal numbers. So double A, double B, double C. Go in there and I'm returning. I don't have to do anything fancy outside of it. I could create a double. I can just return it straight up, or I can get I can get more, so I get into it. Double product, double prod equals A times B times C. And then I can return prod. That is straight up, I can do that. I could have also just return A times B times C. Either way is perfectly the same. Question 27. Write a method to reverse the letters of a string using the character class. So I'm going to be using char in here. I'm not going to use the character class. I don't like how I wrote that. So I'm going to make my method. Public, static. That's pretty much what we've done up to now. Now I'll be returning a string since I brought in strings. String. I'm going to put this, I'm going to call this one reverse me. And I'm taking in a string. Just calling it word. So the first thing I'm going to do, I can run this program just fine. There's only one problem. If I'm going to use a for loop because I'm going to work through, but if the word passed in is either where they declared it but they didn't initialize it, so its default value is null, or if there's nothing in there, it's just an empty string, I want to make sure that I don't run this at it. So I'm going to put in an if statement so I can just break out of this if it's bad. So if word, and this is one of those weird ones, remember I said there's a weird one, if it equals null, that's something you haven't seen right now, or, that's the pipes, or word, and this is, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm just going to stick with what you guys know right now. Equals nothing. So if either case is true, if either case is true, then I'm just going to return the word right back to it. I'm just going to send it all the way back and not worry about it. Remember, once it hits a return, the method ends. So, okay. Now, I've gone through just in case. Now I'm going to make a string called return me. And I'm going to make it equal to nothing. I will say, as you get going on and as we start learning some other classes, there are better ways to write this, but right now that's kind of past us, and it's just there. So if somebody says, hey, that's not the greatest way to concatenate, that's great, but we just haven't got there yet. So now I'm going to do a for loop. I'm going to write my ugly for loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. I made my ugly for loop, so I've got all the elements of a for loop down, but I can change things. So I'm going to be working through the string from front or from back to front. So it's not going to go this way. It's actually going to go in reverse. So it's going to subtract. So I'm going to need to start out at the length of word. Now, word dot length. And I want you to think about this. If the word is for long and I start as I is for word, and I search for the character at position 4, there is none. Because I'm going to have to do -1. Because when I'm getting the length, I'm getting from 1 to how big it is. When I'm using it in the loop, it'll always start with 0. So I need to make sure I subtract 1. So that. And I want I to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, this is where I'm going to get to 0. Greater than or equal to 0. That's a lot different. That's a loop that goes from the back to the front, as opposed to the front to the back. And that's what we want. So here's what we do. We're going to concatenate onto it. Again, this is not the greatest way to do this, but it functions just fine at our level. As you get programs get bigger, it would slow your program down. Word.char at, that's a string function for character at, and we want a character at position I, and we're sticking it on there. I could use an append, but we haven't really gone to that yet, so I'm avoiding it. If you're watching this and you're not in my class, then you'll realize why I did it that way. Now I'm going to return me. And then I'm going to close my loop. And I'm done. It's beautiful. Again, it's very inefficient, but it works fine at our level. This has been fun.